Firstly, thank you very much indeed for coming. I've been the Director General of IWMI for nearly 18 months or a little longer now, and we have not done one of these open houses as yet. We thought it would be a good idea, particularly to inform you what IWMI is, and it's also quite an opportune time for us being in the water business, in that there are potentially a lot of up-and-coming opportunities in Sri Lanka for rehabilitation of the north and the east, which are going to need a very, very major and very strongly collaborative effort between donors, doers, national government agencies, and so on. So we thought we might just raise a few of those issues in passing as we tell you what we do. We intend to keep the talking part, or us talking part, fairly short, 30 or 40 minutes, and then there'll be some hot refreshments and drinks at the end of that. I'm going to start off by giving you a brief introduction about IWMI, just to put you in the picture, and then hand over to several of my colleagues who are going to give you little short presentations indicating more about our work. In case you have never heard of IWMI before, that may be the case for some of you, we are one of the 15 centres of the CGIAR, which is the consultative group on international research. You may not have heard of the CGIAR either, but you probably have heard of the Green Revolution of the 1970s, and some of our sister institutes, particularly IRI, the Rice Research Institute, and the Maize and Wheat Research Institute, CIMIT, in the latter one in Mexico and IRI in the Philippines, were fundamental in driving the Green Revolution. The CGIAR is co-sponsored by the World Bank, UNEP, FAO and EFAD, and IWMI is an international research agency per se, which is recognised and established in Sri Lanka with its headquarters by an act of the Sri Lankan Parliament. We've been running since about 1985, when we were established by the Ford and the Rockefeller Foundations, and we were then taken under the wing of the CGIAR in 1991, I think. David's been here, David Molden on the far right's been here a lot longer than me, so if I get things wrong, he can correct me. We have an international board of trustees, and one of our board members, Ivan De Silva, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Irrigation, represents Sri Lanka on that board, and we're very pleased that he can be here this afternoon, and he will give some comments at the end about some of the current events in terms of water and rehabilitation of systems in Sri Lanka. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Alain Vidal, who's sitting in the front here. Alan has just joined the Challenge Program for Water and Food, which is an integrated program of the CGIAR, which we host here at IWMI as the director. He's going to spend some of his time in France and some of his time here, but we're very pleased to see him, and this is, I think, his second week in the saddle. What do we do? Well, we are focused entirely on research for development, and our vision is very simple. It's water for a food-secure world. But we do recognise, to deliver that vision, we need to improve the management of land and water resources, both in terms of food production, but also in terms of livelihoods for people, and taking into account environmental issues. So water, in the way we look at it, has to be viewed holistically. So although our mandate focuses on food production and agriculture for the poor, we look at water in the broader context of who else is using it, who is competing for it, where does it come from, how will it be impacted by climate change, and so on. We are headquartered in Sri Lanka, which is a logical place in many ways, although you might not believe it, in the sense that some of the earliest irrigation systems of the last 1,000 years of history were established in Sri Lanka, and Madar Samad, who is our Asia Director, sitting next to Ivan De Silva, will talk a little bit about Sri Lanka in a moment. But we do have a number of offices scattered throughout the rest of the world, mainly in areas which are water scarce. These orange and browny colours here indicate areas which have absolute or physical water scarcity. There generally is not enough water for all the potential uses, or all the water's just about been used up. We recognise as well other areas with economic water scarcity where there simply has not been enough investment to make sure that water is delivered to people for agriculture, for drinking water, to industry, and so on and so on. So we have both physical and economic water scarcity to contend with, and we feel we're fairly well placed in terms of the locations where we have our offices to deal with those issues. The other side of the coin is, by working in many countries, we sort of collate a lot of vital and useful information about what will work under certain circumstances in different places. And so we can then outscale that or upscale that or take it into other countries with the benefit of having already seen how it can be put into practice. In my view, water scarcity and associated food, and I should say insecurity probably rather than security, but security is a good word, will be defining issues for the 21st century. We've already seen a major food crisis last year that impacted people particularly badly in the developing countries because of the rise in prices. We didn't see the world running out of food, but our stocks got very much lower than they ever had in the past. And it's been a major wake-up call to a lot of people around the world in terms of starting to think about what needs to be done. We've been sitting on the laurels of the Green Revolution for 30 or 40 years, and we hadn't realised, or many people, particularly politicians, hadn't realised that populations have been steadily increasing, and we were getting into the situation where food scarcity was going to be important. I suspect we'll see many more food crises over the next few years. And how we tackle them in terms of providing water for food and producing more food, I think will also have major geopolitical implications. I was just looking at the world population figures for growth figures today for a talk I have to give in London next week. For example, Pakistan, which is a big agricultural country, already has 180 million people. By 2050, it's predicted to have 330 plus million. It's really going to struggle on its current level of productivity in agriculture to feed that number of people unless it changes the way it manages its water, it manages its agricultural systems. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, has a population increase prediction of only 2 million from 20 odd now to 22 over the same period. So something's going right here in terms of keeping population stable, but it doesn't mean that Sri Lanka doesn't have some water problems. I think food security will be an issue for Sri Lanka. Water quality is already an issue with very little sewage and effluent treatment in the country, which may have big impacts on both agriculture, environment and tourism. And climate change will also, or probably will also, affect parts of Sri Lanka. No one knows exactly how as yet. Some areas may get more intensive rains, heavier storms. Other areas could get longer droughts. And we're already talking about how we rehabilitate much of the north, which is already under a seasonal tropical climate. So again, climate change, we need to be aware of how climate change is going to affect different parts of the country and other countries, and come up with adaptive measures and adaptive strategies, of which there are many, and David will probably talk about some of those later.